Okay, my collection at present comprises around about 70 to 80 species, mostly geckos, but also quite a few small skinks, small dragons, small monitors, and legless lizards. This is one of your northern spiny-tail geckos, Strophyurus ciliaris. Very attractive species, and the good thing about the Strophyurus group is that because they spend most of their time perching on open branches, they're a very visible species, which makes them quite a good species for children. Most geckos, however, don't like to be handled. They're a passive pet rather than an active one. They're not like your bearded dragons and that. But yeah, they're certainly a good species for children in that respect. You can also keep a number of them in a relatively small enclosure. This is one of your velvet geckos. This is ARW10 marmorata. This is a colourform from Meekothara in Western Australia. This is a big female. She's actually gravid at the moment. I'll just turn her around, you'll see the eggs in her belly. Two big white spots just down the bottom there. Velvet geckos are another great beginner species, but they're a little bit shy. They tend to spend most of their time in their hides. Where they come into their own is at feeding time, but they're very aggressive feeders, so they're quite active at that time. A very simple species that don't require UV light. Heating wise, depending on the species, a great many of them can just be kept at ambient temperature depending on where you live. But no, they also come in a huge range of colours depending on their locality. So this is a Meekothara one, and I'll show you some animals from other localities. There you go. So this is another marble velvet gecko, but a different colour form. This is from Owen Pelly in the Northern Territory. And each locality, even within the same geographical range, usually has a different appearance. And some of these have actually technically should be split up into separate species, but the work just hasn't been done yet. In you go. This is another form of ARW10 marmorata from the Adelaide River area. This species will actually be getting renamed probably as ARW10 christiani. Quite a large species. This is a male. You can see the hemipenal bulges at the base of the tail there, which is typical of most male geckos. And this guy's about half grown at this stage, so still quite a bit to go. It'll go another inch or inch and a half in length. Lizards shed their skin in different ways. Geckos are very much like snakes in that they tend to do a complete shed. So we can see tails, legs, and even hemipenal bulges in this shed. Most your skinks and dragons tend to shed in clumps and patches. So it's not common to actually see a full shed as such in your dragons. You usually just notice a change over a period of a week, whereas yeah, geckos tend to do it all in one hit. As do pygopods, your legless lizards. They're very much related to geckos and do most things sort of in a gecko-like fashion.
This gargoyle gecko from the island of New Caledonia is in the process of shedding and eating its own shed skin. Some Australian geckos, including the smooth knobtails, also eat their own shed skin. This is possibly for its nutritional value, or it may be to remove signs of their presence from potential predators. No one really knows. But geckos in many other parts of the world do this as well.
For nesting, I tend to use these just plant pots, converted. They're nice and deep, they're opaque. Usually add to these a mix of either just the core peat or peat and sand mix. Because they're opaque, but you can't tell where the eggs are positioned, so you generally have to tip them out very carefully. There's our first egg. And second egg in that clutch. And it looks like there's probably another clutch of eggs underneath that one from one of the other females. So third egg. Now it's often said that you're not supposed to disturb reptile eggs when they're laid or they run into dramas. With gecko eggs that really isn't a problem as long as you realign them properly. Oh, we've got a third clutch of eggs in there as well. So geckos are almost always 2 eggs per clutch. Occasionally they're 1, but never more than 2 eggs. And they usually lay a clutch anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks apart. So we'll just collect these up and just realign them and put them in an incubation container. Because I've tipped them up, obviously I need to work out which side is up. So I just use a little candling torch, and you'll see as I go around. So you've got a pale side and a pink side. So it's generally the pink side up. So that can now be safely repositioned. So you've got your pale side there.
Just turn the exposure up a little bit.
Pale side, just gently rotate the egg, and then you'll see you've got your pink side on that side. So it's always pink side up. And as long as you're doing this immediately after you disturb them, there really is no issues whatsoever as far as damage to the embryo if this is being done in the first week. Once you get past that, then usually it's better to try and collect them out of the container as they were laid, because by then the embryos started to develop and it's got blood vessels well and truly established. So they're just placed halfway into the vermiculite, and then just make sure you label them so you know what eggs are what. And then pop that into the incubator. For incubation containers for most of my small lizards, I tend to use sealed containers with just a single 4mm hole in one corner. Unlike your large python eggs and large monitor eggs, there's no major need to open the lid on a weekly basis for air exchange. That gives more than enough. The more often you open the lid, the more you have problems with maintaining humidity control, and small eggs dehydrate very quickly. So from that point of view, yeah, I tend to find just a single small hole works better for me. For monitor eggs, I do open them occasionally to get air exchange, but they're metabolically more active in the egg, and they're usually larger eggs.
The road test results for this episode produced the following scores. For the central netted dragon, hatchlings go for about $100 each, so on price I gave them a score of 9. On availability, central netted dragons are regularly bred in captivity, so an 8 seems right here. The species is probably the hardiest of all the small dragons, and beyond a regular food supply and adequate heat, has few maintenance requirements. A score of 9. A 3-foot tank complete with sand substrate and a basking site is adequate for a small colony of these dragons. However, they do require a year-round source of heat, so on garaging a score of 6. Will conveniently eat frozen crickets once trained, but juveniles do require live insects, a 4 in the fuel category. Central netted dragons are a small species, but they do have a big personality. They are also unusual looking lizards, with some potential for morph breeding, a wow factor score of 4, giving a total score of 40. For the banded knobtail gecko, at about $2,000 each, they are the most expensive Australian gecko on the market, so a score of 3 on price seems fair. While they are simple to breed, banded knobtails reproduce very slowly, laying a maximum of 3 or 4 pairs of eggs in a season. So this gecko will be scarce for some time to come, a score of 4 on availability. Banded knobtails are very easy to maintain, a score of 9 here. Garaging requirements are simple, and pairs will happily live and breed in heated plastic tubs filled with sand, a score of 9. They do require live food, so a score of 2 in the fuel category seems fair. This is one of the most attractively patterned of all the knobtails, so a score of 8 for the wow factor, giving an overall score of 35.